We grew Appletree, 24 acquisitions over about 8.5 years with 100% financing. We never took a penny of our own capital or any outside capital other than bank debt and seller financing to grow the business. And our bank relationship was incredibly important in that whole acquisition strategy. Now, we have a couple rules that we really, really recommend when it comes to banking. So many businesses, and I will bet someone watching this is going to have this experience. You bank with the bank that was the closest to your office. So you open a new office and you need a bank. What do? Oh, there's Bank of America right down the street, or Wells Fargo was right down the street, or oh look, there's a bank right next door, and that's where you start your banking relationship. And then that relationship just sort of grows and meanders, and it's totally taken for granted because that's where you started. And so number one, we really believe strongly you want to bank with a large regional bank, a bank where you can actually get to know some people on the loan committee. The KPI that we actually talk about is, could you have lunch with the CEO of the bank if you really wanted to? Number two is, a lot of us treat our bank relationship like a vendor-vendee relationship. But if you really have a solid bank relationship, it's more like having a partner than a vendor. And by having a partner, it means being really transparent with them. When things go well, you share that they went well. But when things don't go well, you're transparent about that and you share why and what your plan is to correct. And you're not scared. If you have a good bank relationship, you're not scared that they find out that things aren't exactly where you thought they would be. The last thing you want to do, the very last thing you want to do, is surprise your bank. Don't ever be in a position where the bank one day asks for a P&L or a balance sheet or some piece of financial data and they're surprised by the results. Another really fundamental thing, especially if you're in the services space, you want to know your bank's position on asset versus non-asset based lending. Most middle market companies don't have the asset load to really use bank capital in the ways they need to for growth. So you want to ask straight up front, what's the bank's position on relationship-based lending, non-asset-based lending? Because if they're asset-based, you're going to have a really hard time if you really have, big growth plans growing with them. So our situation was, we did acquisitions with bank capital, and we were able to borrow 50 to 80% of transactions to buy companies. We would use the rest of the purchase price with seller financing, so the seller would carry a note as well. We're able to do 24 acquisitions. Now, we started in 2003. We sold the company in 2012. So we went through some pretty tumultuous bank times in history. Just coming off the dot-com bubble was when we started, but then we went through the subprime crisis in 2009. We actually were so good with the bank at meeting our projections and treating them like a partner and really keeping them in the loop, that they proactively had given us an acquisition line of credit. So we were able to buy companies without having to go and get the bank's approval first. We had given them some parameters we were willing to work under, and they said, as long as you stick to your parameters and you pay what you've promised to pay in terms of valuation, here's a line of credit, do the acquisitions, and then we'll term those out after you get transactions done. So the subprime crisis comes, and that weekend that everyone talks about, where banks were failing left and right, and it was probably the biggest bank meltdown since the S&L crisis in the 80s. Our bank called us Monday morning, and they said, "Hey, we want to come in and sit down." And I thought, this is it. It's finally going to come to an end. We had this incredible run, and we've got this acquisition line of credit. And the bank came out and they said, "Hey, listen, first of all, we want you to know the bank's okay. We didn't have a lot of real estate exposure, so we survived this weekend pretty well. We're in good shape. But we don't have a lot of borrowers, commercial borrowers, that we have 100% confidence in. And of the handful we have, you're first on the list. So as a show of good faith," this was the Monday of the subprime crisis, "as a show of good faith, we're going to up your acquisition line of credit by 50%. No fees, no charges, no anything. Just sign the paper to acknowledge that we're bumping your line up. But in return for that, we'd really like you to go out and find some more deals and do some more borrowing with the bank." So we were able to do 6 acquisitions in the 12 months following the subprime crisis because our bank was so supportive of us doing deals because they really felt like it was a partnership. So having access to cash when things are going well is really important, but having access to cash when opportunity presents itself in down markets for us was equally important. So don't take your bank relationship for granted. It's one of the most important relationships you have, and the vast majority of companies literally haven't really thought about it. The time to borrow money is not when you are desperate and you need it. You really want to get ahead of the curve and set your lending relationships up when things are going well so that when opportunity presents, you've got the cash you need to do what you want to do.